video of the last time we did Waiting for Godot as a dramatized play reading. So we had the books in hand and we were doing it. Now the first part of it has been erased, as you can see. That's why you're only hearing the sound part of it. But then soon the thing will come on. I'm going to be letting this thing play behind me as I give the lecture, so you have something visual to be enjoying yourself with. This is to emphasize that this is a play, and the only way you can really experience it fully is to actually attend a good production of Beckett's Waiting for Godot. So today I have to give a lecture on it, so I'll be giving the lecture according to the fly sheet you have with you. But in the background, you'll be seeing how a play reading can be made interesting, and when it was done previously, used to do it every year, students used to really relate to it well. And now we start to have the...
And what of it?
It's too much for one man. On the other hand, what's the good of losing art now? That's what I say. We should have thought of it years ago, in the 90s.
Stop blathering and help me off with this boot.
Hand in hand, from the top of the Eiffel Tower, among the first. We were presentable in those days. Now it's too late. They wouldn't even let us up. What are you doing?
I'm taking off my boot. Did that never happen to you?
Boots must be taken off every day. I'm tired of telling you that. Why don't you listen to me?
Help me.
It hurts?
Hurts? He wants to know if it hurts.
No one ever suffers but you.
Oh.
I'd like to hear what you say if you had what I have.
It hurts?
Hurts? He wants to know if it hurts.
Huh. Well, you might button it all the same.
True. Never neglect the little things of life.
Well, what do you expect? You always wait till the last minute.
The last minute. Hope.
Okay, so this is just to let you know that if you really want to study and understand what Samuel Beckett is doing in Waiting for Godot, you really have to take a look at it as you do in this kind of a course, read the script if you like, but you have to be trying to imagine and keep in your minds that the medium here is theater, drama, not words, and therefore the words have to be put into people and action and setting and everything that's happening for you to get the full meaning. I will be trying to tell you a little bit about this play, its importance in the 20th century, understanding of humanity and what the human condition is all about, and what life is all about. So basically, let me just start with a few facts. Samuel Beckett was born in 1906 to middle-class Protestant parents near very, very, very Catholic Dublin, Ireland. A bright student of modern languages at Trinity College in Dublin. Upon graduation, he taught at the prestigious École Normale Supérieure in Paris between 1928 to 1930, returning to Dublin to hold the position of assistant lecturer in French at Trinity College. 2 years later, he left an academic career to travel around Germany and France until in 1937, he decided to settle down permanently in Paris. During World War II, he joined the French Muqawami, the French Resistance, working near Avignon as an agricultural laborer. After the war, he settled back in Paris and decided to write in the French language. Thus, many of his most famous works, including Waiting for Godot, were initially presented in French, later to be translated by himself into his mother tongue. This is very important because he said that if he was writing in his mother tongue, he'd sort of, get into cliché writing and automatic writing, whereas by having to do it in French, he had to think more when he was writing. That's why he chose to use the French language rather than his native English in doing many of these things. In 1959, Trinity University bestowed upon him an honorary doctorate in letters, and in 1969, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature, and what they said about it was, quote, "for writing which acquired its elevation in the destitution of modern man." Elevation in the destitution of modern man. He has written important novels, poems, short stories, in addition to plays and mimes for stage and radio. He died in 1991. For more detailed biographical notes, I'm not going to waste time in this lecture to give it to you. You can find that easily on the web nowadays. So now let's see what I can do for you with the actual lecture that's detailed. The main points are detailed on your fly sheet. First of all, the fly sheet is the outline of it. The main points I'll be handling. But if you take a look at the other side of it, does anybody recognize it? Has anybody seen this before? What is it? All right, it's Picasso's Guernica, one of the most famous and influential pieces of art in the 20th century. So you should see it properly in color, and you can do that now on the web. You can find out. You can just get Guernica. But if you take a look at it, one of the main things about it is that it's not easy to understand. What's this all about? He was where he was in at the time of the Spanish Civil War, and this is what he produced at that time. Right? An artist tries to produce something that will communicate to us something of what the artist was experiencing as an artist, not just as an ordinary person, but as an artist who has developed their skills of expressing things that most of us cannot express. So if you take a look at this, primarily, one way of understanding it, and those of us who've been living in the world for the last 20 years, at least, or maybe more, and certainly if you lived in the Lebanese Civil War, this is, one thing you can see in it is the absolute uselessness of war, the destruction of war, how it fragments absolutely everything. So we have to take a look at it, and this helped people to start to develop more and more, everybody, because it became common to look at it for many, many people, not just for the elite artists. But this was one of the things in the 20th century that helped people to open up to all areas of art, all types of communication in art, away from the representative, the documentary, the photographic, the tape recorded, all right? But to take a look and see if you can try to understand life through symbols that require you to do much more looking, getting into it, but the proper one, not this sheet. Trying to see, trying to see, can you get into the mind of the artist? What was that artist trying to present? So it presents us now with one of the two things I want to focus on in terms of situating Waiting for Godot. So at the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century, there were these revolutions against art as being something just simply representative. You want a picture of me, well, can you get an artist to draw a proper one of me? Well, you can do that with a camera, all right? But an artist who takes a look at me, and especially if they know me, can present me in a very different way than what you're seeing. If they admire me, they can sort of present me that you'd recognize me, but in a situation where it would invite you to admire, respect, look at this person. Or if the artist didn't particularly like me or could see me as I really am, he could present me in sort of like a horrible monster or just a decrepit old creature or something like that. So art is always interpretative, so that even what we call representative art is already an interpretation of nature. It's not just a photograph. And even now in photography, the photographer's art comes into the way. So not everybody can take photographs the way a skilled and advanced artist in photography can take it properly. So in the world of art, there was a revolution against art being something just sort of, documentary. And especially this was allied to the growth in interest in scientific works and scientific approaches to things, which always tended to move into sort of a kind of a deterministic mode, cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. There's no room for the human, for human freedom, for human emotion, for human, the subject. Not subjective, meaning something that, can only, just for me, but something that a subject can grapple with and understand with. A human as subject, not just the human as object of a picture, but the subject of doing this. So we got into this division that came to be called realism versus anti-realism, just in the most general and simple way for you to understand it. Representational versus presentational. You represent something as it is. You present an understanding and an interpretation and a deeper look into something as interpreted by someone. Now, the more skilled that person is, the more that thing is going to really, echo in many, many people's minds. So Guernica echoed in many people's minds at that time because they could see in it what he was trying to present. His apprehension and his communication of the horrors of civil war, of the uselessness of it, of the fragmentation that it develops, etc. That's one way of looking at Guernica. But this art, that's so. Waiting for Godot, in the world of theater, came along those lines. When you read it, you won't understand anything in it, unless you've already studied, you know what it's all about. But if you just pick up the book and read it, you won't understand much at all. If you attend the play without understanding what it's all about, you might come out with how some people first received it. It's 2 acts. So one critic in London wrote for his newspaper the next day a critique of the play, and he said, nothing happens twice, 2-act play. Nothing happens twice. So that's one way. If you just read it simply as it is, you might say, okay, I'm reading all this, and then, so what? Where does it, what's it leading me to, right? So that anti-realism, presentationalism, meaning using these terms in these specific ways, meaning presenting an interpretation, not just representing something accurately, is the mode of Waiting for Godot in theater. So the other main point I want to try to help you understand by the end of this lecture is the philosophical situation, because that's what our CVSP program really delves into, the kind of reflecting on what the meaning of life is in the broadest philosophical mode, because philosophy can mean many things, but in the broadest mode, that's what we do in CVSP, from Gilgamesh to Hawking and to on beyond. So in that world, in the 20th century, what became important was a philosophy came to be called existentialism. But existentialisms, many forms of existentialism, really primarily presents you with a mode, a philosophical approach, not a conclusion. So you can use an existential mode and wind up being an atheist, being a believer, being a whatever. That doesn't matter what your conclusion is. It's the mode, a non-speculative, a non-abstract, a non-theoretical mode of relating to life with the fullness of your mind. So existential means the full use of mind, the full use of knowing how to do philosophy as it traditionally is being done, but now knowing how to incorporate into what you want to learn about life, your life. You remember what Nietzsche had said, every philosophy is the autobiography of the philosopher, meaning you can't really grapple with something serious that's telling you something about your life if you don't know where it's coming from, if you don't know the context, and if you don't know the context of the person doing it. So existential means you have to bring in as much as you can of the biography, of the experience, of all this, and relating it to the experience of your own life, and testing what's being told you about you by testing it in your own life, in your own relationships, and what you're seeing in the world happening to you. So existentialisms came up in the 20th century. Now, this is a representative of absurdity, absurdism, philosophy of the absurd. Now, what's the relationship between the two? I think that's a very important point I want to try to clarify today. Existentialists start off with what the absurdists give you. So if you want to understand existentialists in the 20th century, you start with this. You start with what Beckett is giving us in his theater of the absurd. All right? Once you've understood what is meant by absurdity, and when you see it concretely, not just as a definition, and when you start to relate it to things you're experiencing in life and things that are happening, all right, you start to understand at least a little at a beginning level of what could it possibly mean if you really believed the world had no meaning. Absurdity, absurd, is deaf to you. There's nothing in this universe that really connects to a human being in a serious way. The universe that we live in is deaf to the human being. Absurdity finally comes to mean this: it does not allow us to have any definite conclusion about the meaning of life. Absurdity. And that's what this play is trying to present to you through the play. What existentialisms do is that they say that's the starting point. Once you understand that the challenge, this is a challenge, not a final conclusion. Nobody in the 20th century can continue to go on and try to seek wisdom or hikmah, or truth, or the meaning of life without facing this reality. The world we live in the modern period, the 20th century, allows us to think maybe this world is crazy. World War I, the most educated people in the world, the most advanced people in civilization, eating away at each other, killing millions of people, and for what? All right? Capitalism, that's going to bring in the best possible life in the world. 1929, the crash, all right? Capitalism showed its true face in that it can go very nice for a while, and certainly for those who are benefiting from it, but you never know, at what moment capitalism will simply crash, and with it will crash a lot. So capitalism is not the savior of the world, as capitalists were trying to present, all right? Socialisms, same thing, right? Marxism already, by the time he wrote this, had taken over Russia and had just begun to take over China. And already you saw all the miseries that this brought to the Russian world in the name of Marxism, in the name of great socialism. All right? There's just nothing that seems to be working in this modern period. And so maybe, perhaps the best, the most intelligent, the most rational, the most concrete conclusion we can have about the world, very simply, is what we're getting in Waiting for Godot. All right? We do things, we try, we convince ourselves this is important. We do lots of things, activities, but there's no action. Action means purpose. You're going somewhere, all right? So the two acts of this play simply give us, and if it's done well, a very interesting play, great fun, comedy, all right? But a tragic type of message through the medium of comedy. So he calls his play a tragicomedy. But don't look for a definition, please. Whenever you're doing something serious, take a look and see how the person is using these words. Because every thinker uses words, but to give them the meaning they want to give them. All right? And so he's using the term tragicomedy, meaning the mode is comedy. If it's done well, you'll enjoy it. All right? You have lots of laughs and lots of, very interesting. If it's done poorly, of course, that won't happen. But the proper handling of this is to take him seriously. This is a comedy. But the message that comes through it is more like a tragedy. So what is it? What is life? Is life a tragedy or is life a comedy? Who knows? You see, that's the final answer of all this, is that you can never know. You have just as much evidence to think it's a comedy. You have just enough evidence to think it's a tragedy. And it would be nice, you see, you'd have certainty. If you knew life was a comedy, what life means is that life is positive. Comedy, by the way, does not mean ha, ha, ha. Comedy means that no matter how bad it might seem, there is hope and that you can reach something there. And so human effort is worthwhile because we can reach something great. In tragedy, it's the opposite. The only thing you can do is be an active human being and do something for humanity. Be a Prometheus, be an Oedipus, be somebody who does something in the face of a horrible world, all right? So you could know you're either in a tragic world, you're in a comic world. The absurd is that that's too much meaning. We don't know that much. We cannot really justify thinking life is hopeful and a comedy, and therefore no matter how bad things are in it, we can progress and we can move on. Tragedy, no matter what you do, you can never change things. You can never improve, all right? But remember, the message of tragedy was heroism, which you don't find either in Freud or in Beckett. You find it again coming back in existentialism. Existentialism brings back the heroic aspect of the human being faced with the challenge that the world is absurd. So the name of Heidegger, one of the most influential philosophers in the 20th century, was in the academic and the artistic and the philosophical air. And therefore, one of the things he does here, the way he's presenting this particular play, Heidegger had said, when you think about your life, when you start to get mature and you have enough philosophical background, because they're always talking to their own peers. The real insight about what life is all about is that you must start with the given that you can experience and that you can understand. Don't use theories and abstractions and speculations. You're just thrown into this world. Right? You're just thrown into this world. Here you are. And then, okay, but what does it mean? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What's meaning? What should I live for? What's destructive? What's constructive? All these questions, don't start with them. Start with facts. Start with experience. You're thrown into the world, right? And this is one of the main things you're going to get in this play. They're just thrown into wherever they are. And so in the conversation with one another, we learn nothing. Where did they come from? Who are they? What are they doing? Why are they there? Where are they going? All right? You just get human beings interacting with one another in a way that's fun and that's, different and varied and all this. But there's no action. There's only activity. They do lots of activities, but they never go anywhere. They never move anywhere. Therefore, Act 1 ends and Act 2 begins. And because it's a play and has to be interesting, Act 2 has sufficient changes in it, so it isn't just a repetition. But the meaning of Act 2 is the same meaning as in Act 1. And therefore, if you had an Act 3, it would be boring, all right? The two acts give you the point. Life is just what you're finding in Act 1, because it's not going to change. Act 2, there's no change. It's a change in circumstance to make it an interesting play, but the meaning is exactly the same. So, and what happens? The net result of both is we know nothing with certainty. So let me try now to do it a little bit more specifically. But first of all, remember those two things. How do you present things in an artistic fashion? Simply by the photocopy type, a documentary or that, or don't you leave that to the other fields? Art should take a look at what everybody else is doing in this kind of way and try to go into something that these things don't do. Try to go into the subject aspect of our humanity, all right? We are subjects, not just objects. Okay, in science and all of that, we study things as objects. But to study the human being as a subject is not that simple. It requires life and experience, and you're much less likely to get, if you do it properly, to become dogmatic. You understand better that life is so rich that there are some things you can all have in common, of course, or we wouldn't have a common society or common anything. But in terms of, the ultimate meaning of a human being, it can be so diverse. It really does depend on what you do and how you respond to life. If you just respond to it passively and just wanting to get everything, and if you think you're the center of the world, everybody needs to serve you, you'll get one kind of result. If you take a more sort of a heroic from the and Prometheus and Oedipus and all the people who have given their lives so that humanity can progress, all right? Plato's philosopher, I think, going back down in the cave, if you took that, then you're in a very different understanding of, so you are creating yourself. This was the existentialist starting point, that once you understand what life is really all about, And you get away from the constraints and the prison of thinking you're just a developed computer so you can understand everything through science, and you don't even know what science is, but you just, believe it. The latest cliches that Nietzsche would be attacking today if he lived in the world today, all the things that have become the cliches of your world today. Once you go beyond that, you're in the world of freedom. You're in the world of indecision. You're in the world of there aren't simple answers. You have to really struggle to find it. You start with what you have, and you develop with what you have, and it's a progressive thing. But you don't reach a point where you can dogmatically say, this is it, and if you don't follow me, I'm going to chop your head off, or you're just stupid, and you belong to, you're a dinosaur or something like that. It's the existential thinking is precisely the method of tolerance, all right? Proper tolerance, not tolerance and anything goes. Because existential thinking, like following Nietzsche and people like him, was you live according to the most authentic standards you have. You have to live at the excellence level. And if you don't, you're a nothing. You're somebody that Nietzsche would vomit, Christ would vomit, if you're living at the mediocre level. If you didn't get that point from Nietzsche, you haven't understood anything about Nietzsche. He isn't a relativist. He's telling you, you have to seek the highest. You have to seek the authentic. Be authentic. Recognize you can fool yourself. You can be a hypocrite even to yourself. The more you recognize it, the more you really want to try to start to live a more authentic life. Authenticity is the main value that you judge everything else by. Authenticity will be life-enhancing. Authenticity will give you true freedom. Authenticity will give you true joy. All right? All this is the application, that Nietzsche had picked up from previous. He didn't invent it, but he sort of gave it a push into this world. So existential thinking starts with the challenge of the absurd. How do you know it's not absurd? How do you know that what you think you know and all of these things? Well, back to Socrates. Everybody thinks they know. But Socrates says the starting point of somebody who knows is to recognize how little he knows. The recognition of your own ignorance. As soon as you go beyond that, you become dogmatic, you become oppressive, you become dead. You give death, you don't give life. So existential thought comes out of this kind of, or it precedes it, and then it develops from it. You cannot skip over facing life may be absurd. Maybe there really is no meaning, so you just invent meanings as you go along, to survive, to make you happy, things that, but you're never really certain. Existential thinking says, no. You can reach your own certainties, and they're not relativistic. Your own certainty, because that's now, it all goes, and it's I think that, and you think that, and I think that. No. Authenticity sets a bar for what is true and what is not true, and what is right and what is not right. There are standards. Nietzsche had high standards, and that was one of his problems. And so existential thinking brings that back in. You are a responsible creature. You're either helping the survival of the unfittest, or you are actually really making a contribution, no matter how small it is, to bringing in the Übermensch, to letting evolution really be going into a higher form, rather than just sort of say, we're evolving and everything is evolving and evolution. Who cares whether it's evolution or creationism? The important thing is how you live. Right? Nowadays, people are so worried about, can they prove creationism or can they prove evolutionary theory? That's very good, very interesting. But that doesn't take the place of your personal, subjective responsibility. So you reach the certainties that you have lived for. You reach the certainties that you have struggled for. You reach the certainties. That's the only thing that can be called a certainty in existential thinking. Something that you have reached seriously, and you've really devoted, and you'll continue to devote the best you have, knowing you're limited, knowing you can be hypocritical, having a true knowledge of yourself, but you're trying your best. Okay, that's a serious truth. And you'll find that lots of people share it with you. You don't have to impose it on anyone. You have to preach it to anyone. You'll find a commonality of people who are living like that, and you'll be able to recognize them. You'll find yourself why you like these people, why you dislike these people. So this existential thing, because that's one of the main things at this point that really in the 20th century that you need to understand, because there's what is absurdity, but what is existential thinking. You're going to be getting some of it now through Simone de Beauvoir, but only focused on one topic. But it's a much broader and much more interesting thing that goes way back to Socrates and Augustine and Pascal and Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky and Nietzsche and well into the 20th century. This whole flow that your truth should be something you are living for, you are demonstrating, you are witnessing to. That's the meaning of being of shahada. You know, in religion, if shahada means anything, it doesn't just mean you're proclaiming your belief in a doctrine or a dogma or a religion or a culture. It means you are dedicating your life to be a witness, that your life will be a witness to what it is you are trying to say is the truth, whether it's atheism or whether it's theism, it doesn't matter what it is. You know, what unites humanity is that they can search for authenticity, and the more they realize that, the more they realize how inauthentic you can be, mauvaise foi, you have a bad will, you pretend to be so, and you can even convince yourself you're doing something good, but you really know that you're doing this just for maslaha, or just to fool somebody, you know. Okay, so getting now back to this particular play. All right, so I've given you the number one biographical notes in Sam Beckett. The headaches and Rorschach tests and Peter Sellers' meaning of the title of the lecture is, he himself says about the play that I just put it out there. If you want to get headaches trying to interpret it, and because some people started interpreting it as a Marxist allegory, a Christian allegory, a this allegory or that allegory, and you're trying to bring it back into one system. And he's saying that that's not what I'm doing. I'm just putting it all out there, and you decide what you can make. It's a challenge, all right? And this is the heart of the existential challenge, right? You've got to make something out of all of this. Whatever you get out of it, use it to think about your own life. Use it to compare it with things you think of in your own life or relationships with others. Use it as a wake-up call to use your mind, to be authentic, to recognize your own inauthenticity. Don't look to me, Samuel Beckett, to give you the truth about anything. I'm putting it out as a challenge. The challenge, I've been trying to explain to you, is that maybe life is absurd. How are you so sure it has the meaning you think you've had? All right? Well, one test for it existentially is, have you really struggled for it? Are you really thinking about it? Are you really open-minded about it? Are you really seeking to sort of expose it to other views so that you can really come to the conclusion it's a tested certainty? It's not just something that I've picked up along the way because it's the latest fashion. I'm at university. That's what everybody believes at university, and that's what will give me good grades if I give it to the teacher and pretend that that's what I believe. You know, all this kind of mauvaise foi life. All right, is what he's challenging you. So he says, if you want to get headaches, provide your own aspirin, because that's not what I want to give you. I don't want to just to let you, struggle to see, well, which philosophy can I put this into? Is this a Marxist allegory? Is this a Christian allegory? Is this an atheistic allegory? So, get away from all these isms. See, I'm Nietzsche coming back at you through all of this. Preceding Nietzsche and following Nietzsche. The notion is, don't get yourself bound into an ism unless you're really living it yourself, unless you're really understanding it and really being open to expose it to other isms. And don't lose your humanity in an ism. And therefore you lose the humanity of others because they're in another ism. All right? Life is much more serious than that. So the headaches. Rorschach text, meaning, in other words, any psychology students here have used Rorschach test? You know what a Rorschach test is? Okay, so I splash something onto a piece of paper. I'm your psychotherapist, right? I splash something on a piece of paper, and I ask you to interpret what you see in it. As you interpret what you see in it, I, the skilled psychotherapist, will start to help you understand what's going on in your own mind, all right? Because what will come out is the way you're thinking, the way what's affecting you. So I use it as one tool in psychology of trying to help you understand, unless I'm trying to impose it on you through Freudian psychoanalysis or something. But proper psychotherapy is to try to help you understand yourself, try to help you see, and given your own context, your own beliefs, your own this, what's happening, not to come and impose on you a Freudian psychoanalysis or a this psychoanalysis or that psychoanalysis. Those are ideologies. Those are the isms that Nietzsche would be loving to hammer away at in the world, the ones that you're all probably very interested in. This is the meaning of the Rorschach test. And Peter Sellers, if you have time to watch a movie, and should still be available, there was a movie called Being There. And Peter Sellers is one of the great actors of the 20th century, and he's Clouseau movies and Pink Panther movies, and he adopts an Indian And so he was, oh yeah, I'm going to get some birdie num num, and oh, they're very fine, they're very nice. You know, so where he portrays, you know, people of different, he plays many different parts. But in being there, he plays a very challenged human being, who, you know, he doesn't have nothing obvious there, but you know, there isn't much up here, and so he's just thrown into the world. What happens there in that the people who are taking care of him die. When they die, he has no one to take care of him. And so they want, you know, the owners of the house want the house, so they kick him out. So this is where he's thrown into the world. He's thrown out into the world, all right? People start to meet him. You know, he's nice enough, he appears nice enough, he appears, you know, you can't tell just from seeing. And they all start to read into him. You know, he makes a few comments here or there, and they all start to sort of, you know, oh yes, yeah, well that's what I think too, or this, you know, without ever realizing what the person's really saying. And so little by little, he goes up the social ladder until he becomes President of the United States of America. All right, he has nothing up here. All right, he's just the product of people reading into him what they want to see. See, nobody listens, nobody really has empathy, nobody really tries to understand someone. You know, you meet someone, you just want to see what you can get from them that, you know, that ties into what you want to think. And so you don't take the trouble to understand. So in exposing this kind of thing, in the Peter Sellers movie, he winds up being president of the United States of America. And this is well before Trump. I mean, sorry, I didn't mean that. That's just a joke. All right, but nobody smiles, I see. Okay, but he becomes there. So this is the point of one way of understanding what Beckett is telling us. We don't have to believe him, but telling him, this is how you should look at my work. It's just there. Now you read into it what you want to find in it, all right? And that's what my play is all about. My play is all about you looking at all of this, and you make what you want of it. So it's like it's a do-it-yourself play. Therefore, there's no clear characters. 4 people are the main ones. There are 5 altogether. Vladimir and Estragon are the first 2. Yeah, the 2 there, they're still there. The third one who's sitting over here now is Pozzo, and the one he comes in like his donkey is Lucky. All right? These 2 represent all relationships. So now we're looking at it from a symbolico-allegorical lens, and that's where it fits in the world of art and all of that. Looking at it with that lens, we see that they represent everything that is equality. Friends in the past, students and teachers, now the students are the masters and teachers are the slaves. But whatever you can think of as a relationship of equality, all right, friendship, whatever, that's what they represent. So as you watch what happens with them, of course, what the product of it all is, because I don't have much time, I'd like to have much more time. Well, I wish we could just see the whole thing and then comment on it. But basically, what he's trying to tell you, to challenge you with, is that nobody understands anybody. All right? We live together because we don't want to be alone. We don't really ever understand each other. There's no real communication. Language, the medium, has broken down because they use language, but they don't communicate anything to each other. All right? All through. The way he sets the play up is precisely that every aspect of the play presents to you this particular view. Humans simply do not understand one another. We barely understand ourselves. How can we therefore ever conclude that I know something about the meaning of life? There's no understanding. Language, we use it, you know, just to keep going for survival purposes and all this. But to understand communication, the universe is sourd, and we are sourd. We are deaf to one another properly. So that's represented through friendship relationships. The other 2, the master and the slave, represent all master-slave type relationships. Today, I would say student-teacher. You know, students are the masters and teachers are the slaves. You know, we have to be scared of what you think of us. All right? But please, you know, I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. But basically, wherever there's an oppressive element in a relationship, or not just oppressive, wherever, you know, one has the control and the other one doesn't, Pozzo and Lucky are the 2 characters. So they represent, think of all relationships there are in the world and boil them down to what these 2 represent and how they relate to one another and what is the nature of the relationship. all master-slave type relationships boiled down into Pozzo and Lucky and what they do, all right? And there's a fifth character, the boy, who comes in at the end of the play, at the end of each act, and then the end of the play again, the end of there are two acts. And that's where you think you're going to finally get some kind of a message to let you know what's going on, all right? What does the boy come in at the end of each thing? See, what are they doing? The only thing they're doing is waiting. Life is waiting because we don't have anything already, but we're waiting for something. And so they're waiting for Godot. What is Godot? Well, you know, when Beckett was asked, he said, if I knew what Godot was, I would have put it into my play. Now, he's not going to put himself, you know, he's not going to commit himself to any meaning of what it is. But Godot winds up being anything, think of this for yourself, anything that really keeps you motivated, anything that keeps you from committing suicide, anything that commits you to still think and still believe that maybe, you know, by waiting something will happen and we will get something. And that's the heart of the message of the play. The heart of the message of the play, and that's why it's called Waiting for Godot, that's what life is all about, waiting for something. So it's neither hopeful nor is it despair. Okay? If it was one or the other, you could at least say, you know, what life is about. If it's really so negative, well, then suicide might seem, you know, logical. If it's hopeful, then okay, you should, no matter what happens, you should continue to go on. But you can't tell anymore. You see, the whole atmosphere of the first half of the 20th century, and then it becomes more so, is a very confusing situation for humanity. All right, it's no longer the certainties of when you belong to one group or one thing or one that, and where there was more of a commonality in terms of what people believed in, etc. The 20th century is sort of fragmented, not just in the Civil War here, but fragmented human relationships, fragmented human beings, all right? And so different people in the 20th century start to express this in their own way. Right? The absurdists in this kind of way, the existentialists by telling you, well, that's just a challenge. There is meaning, but you have to find it. There are certainties, but you have to struggle for them. So existentialism brings back the struggle in human life, the positive struggle, that there is meaning. You create meaning. If you don't believe in a God, well, you create your own nature. If you believe in a God, well, if you believe in any serious God, this God is not a serious God unless that's really what he wants humans to do. If he doesn't want humans to be in his image and likeness and be creative and active and developing and all of this, then why continue to believe in this God? So whether you believe in a God, and then also a lot of existentialists were Christian existentialists, following basically Kierkegaard and Dostoevsky and other people like that who were Christians, and the others were atheists. So it doesn't matter which you conclude. The point is, check yourself. Are you believing what you're believing because you're really making an effort to understand it? Have you really spent enough? Or you're just picking up the latest fashionable thing, you know, that becomes an idol for a Nietzsche to come and want to hammer away and knock down. So this is the play itself, basically presenting life in this kind of a way, reducing it to these four. The fifth one comes in and says, at the end, Godot apologizes. He can't come today, but you know, he will come tomorrow. Okay, so Act 2 opens up, and you have differences, you know, to make it a bit more interesting. It isn't just a photocopy, but the same meaning in Act 2. End of Act 2, the boy comes in. Godot says, sorry, he can't make it today. He'll come tomorrow, all right? In, which language will I use today? I used to use Russian. In Russian, we always say, Bukra belmishmish. Have you ever heard that in Russian? Not even in Arabic anymore. So it's really, you know, Bukra, but Bukra means it won't happen. رجع لعندي بكره بدبر لك هيدي بترجع بكره ما بيعمل لك شيء. يعني بكره means I'm not going to help you. It's not going to happen. You know, bukra. So this is the meaning of it. If you're looking for something definite, a definite Godot won't come. That's why you need two acts, because if you had only one act, there are one-act plays. Rarely do you have two-act plays. You have a one-act play, okay, you might think, well, you know, Godot will come tomorrow. If you have the second act, you don't need a third act if you're getting the message. The message is not going to come. So if you have a third act doing all this, you'd get bored. Or you'd say, this is poor art. You know, I don't need the third one. You know, art has to be economical in this sense, doing just what's needed. So two acts give you the message if you understood it, and if you understand the context in which it was coming in. All right? The whole notion of World War I, the Depression in 1929, showing what a capitalist system as it was practiced then, what it can do, the horrible things it can do to humanity, so you don't get into that ism of a capitalism or whatever else you get into. And then World War II had begun with Nazism, and that was what Nietzsche was fighting, right? So middle of the 20th century now we are when he's writing this, 1950. So this is the message, therefore, is that basically what the play represents are some of those main points there, that this is a direct presentation of life. This is not giving you a philosophical sort of analysis. It's letting you experience it. So if you really attend the play and you really experience it properly and you come ready to understand, what you're supposed to get from this is the truth about life. That first quotation there is his own words, okay? Drawn into the core of the eddy. I want to take you away from all the details and the facts that you're all immersed in, and I want to take you right to what life is all about. All right? And that's one of the functions of art. Art tries to give you direct experience, a direct message, not something that you then put it into words and you analyze it and all of this. But art is meant to give you a direct experience of something. All right? That's the genius of art. So that's what he says he is. And so, we've had this in literature all through, Plato's cave, Dante's purgatory, hell and heaven, all kinds of symbolic meanings, meaning this is what life's all about. Beware of intellectual reductionism, of the complex concreteness of life. That's the point of all this. We're always, especially at universities, we're always tempted. This is the original temptation and the original sin when we give into it. that hits academic people all the time. Intellectual reductionism of life. Just because I can put it into a formula or I can do something like that, I think I have, I've said all things about. All you've said, Habibi, is the structure of it. You haven't told me anything about its effect. It's the way it affects humans, the way it affects history, the way it affects this. You haven't told me anything about that because you can't. That has to come in a different way than what your intellectual reductionism, and you think it's science and it's logic and it's khalas, it's the truth about everything. That's just that's the lowest level of human understanding for a Beckett or for the people in this 20th century. So the second part there, man is thrown into the world. So you can't start with a belief in a good God who's taking care of you. You get nothing from society because nobody understands anybody anyway. And you get nothing from humanistic values other than slogans for a Nietzsche to come and tear them apart. All right? Fraternité, égalité, fraternité, what are the three of them? You all know it. The French Revolution. All right? Fraternité, égalité, liberté, the three things there. All right? Wonderful. But then take a look at the French Revolution, see what they did. See they themselves, what kind of a witness were they to those slogans? All right? They used the guillotine more than anybody had ever used it before, and anybody who disagreed with them. So the humanistic values, they let us think there's something worthwhile, and something is really going on. Democracy for the world, we want to bring democracy to the world. The Arab Spring, all the slogans, that hopefully you've already tasted a little bit of what this attitude against them is when you read Nietzsche. So in the beginning, therefore, what's the heart of our humanity? Solitude. We're on our own. Nobody understands us. There's nothing. That's where you start from. You don't end there. You see, you end there only if you stop with absurdity. It's a challenge. What's your answer to this question? Are we really so left out? Are we really so alone? In essence, at a metaphysical level, at an ontological level, because metaphysics is a bad word, alienation. There's no real fellowship, there's no real empathy, there's no real communication. Language is impotent. They use language, but nobody understands anybody. And I'm going to read that just a little bit because I never wind up doing it. Just to give you a bit of a taste of this, and if I don't have it with me, then that's here it is. Okay, this is Lucky's speech. This is the longest speech in the whole play. And to give you a sense of that there's paralysis, you can't really come to any conclusion from what he's saying. He gives you A and then not A. He gives you X and not X, and both have equal worth. So when you come to that long speech of Lucky, this is one of the loveliest things. Given the existence as uttered forth in the public works of Puncher and Watman of a personal God, quack, 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 duck-like, quack, quack, quack. But qua means, very legal language and all that. It sounds very good, you see, when you look at the qua, qua, qua. But quack, 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 outside time without extension, who from the heights of divine apathetic, divine aphasia, no feeling, loves us dearly, with some exceptions for reasons unknown, but time will tell, and suffers like the divine Miranda. But those who are reasons unknown, but time will tell, are plunged in torment, plunged in fire, whose fire flames, if that continues, and who can doubt it, will fire the firmament, that is to say, blast hell to heaven. Oh, so blue still and calm, so calm, with a calm which even though intermittent is better than nothing, but not so fast, and considering what is more, that is a result of the labors left unfinished crowd by the academy, and anthropometry of Essie and Posse of Testu and Cunard, it is established beyond all doubt, all other doubt than that which clings to the labors of men, that as a result of the labors unfinished of Testu and Cunard, it is established, as hereinafter, but not so fast, for reasons unknown, that as a result of the public works of Puncher and Watman, it is established beyond all doubt that in view of the labors of Fartov and Belcher, left unfinished for reasons unknown, of Testu and Cunard, left unfinished, it is established, what many deny, that man in Posse or Testu and Cunard, that man in Essie, that man in short, that man in brief, in spite of the strides of alimentation and defecation, is seen to waste and pine, and concurrently, simultaneously, what's more for reasons unknown, in spite of the strides of physical culture, the practice of sports, such as tennis, football, running, cycling, swimming, flying, floating, riding, gliding, conating, tennis, playing, sports of all kinds of hockey and all kinds of penicillin and succedaneous. In a word, I resume, and concurrently, simultaneously, for reasons unknown, to shrink and swindle. In spite of the tennis, I resume flying, guiding, golf over 9 and 18 holes, tennis of all sorts, in a word, for reasons unknown and fecund. But, it goes on like this, a monologue, which represents symbolically, this is reason, because Lucky represents reason, all right? And he has taught Pozzo how to think. But look at what has happened to reason, you see, as a god, as an idol, in the Enlightenment period. Reason is going to solve everything. What reason? The reason you've packaged reason into by reducing it to just what you think reason is. All right? Well, this is what reason is. Sounds good, impressive. You see, if I had more time to do it, but it's said in sort of legal language, as if it's clear, and he's setting up an argument and reaching an ending, full of stuff, but no meaning. Right? Fadli. Nothing. Okay, just jaja. So this is one of the basic anti-enlightenment wake-up calls to people in the 20th century. That enlightenment, everybody wants enlightenment, but don't you define what enlightenment is and don't stop at a first definition. If enlightenment means you're going to criticize your own meaning of enlightenment and develop it and go on. If you think enlightenment, because now everybody's very interested in copying the Enlightenment that happened in the 17th century and the 18th century in Europe. But we're in the 21st century, Habibi, and you're in a much different world. Don't just copycat something. Get the principles, get the ideas, what they were trying to do in their thing, get the biography of the people doing it, all right? And now have a proper critical application in the 21st century, and especially 21st century university world, because these people all the people that you study really are addressing people at that level. They're not just addressing everybody. That's why Nietzsche says, I only attack the successful, only the victorious. Right? What I'm trying to do is to get the people who think they know everything, who are running the whole world through there because they're changing institutions and the academic curriculum, and they're doing everything. They have all the power. All right? I want to challenge them. All right? They're the ones I'm interested in, not somebody who isn't into this and who's doing their best. That's okay. I'm sorry that I don't know how to do this in 50 minutes.